in 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Catweasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this episode, we head back to 1976 for Cracked Justice. Imagine our shock and horror when Stumpy and I found that there was now a new judge and overseer of playground law in school. Someone who had usurped and overthrown Kerry O'Keefe, that red-haired arbiter of justice, and our school's most knowledgeable character in the intricacies of playground legal practices, and who had sat on the Throne of Judgement for some time. This throne actually being an old disused Armitage Shanks toilet that was hidden in the trees at the end of the school field. During his time on the throne, Kerry O'Keefe, although a hard judge, had always been scrupulously fair, always balancing the scales of justice, guiding the jury of pupils to reach the right decisions, and then duly passing sentence, for the harshest of which he would don a black cap. We only found out about this unsettling coup when one warm lunchtime we headed up to the court area to see if there were any interesting cases being heard, and when, to our great surprise, we saw a very large crowd gathered, mainly comprising kids from the year below. Making our way through the throng, Stumpy and I could hear a familiar horrible voice, talking loudly and saying, "So, this is how the new law will work." "That sounds like Monstrous Musgrove," said Stumpy. And then, as we reached the clearing, that's when we had our moment of shock and horror. For we saw, to our amazement, not Kerry O'Keefe sitting on the Throne of Judgement, but Monstrous Melvyn Musgrove, with 4 of his strong lurch-like henchmen standing on guard either side. Now, when I say sitting on the throne, I mean spreading, for his huge fleshy figure flopped down the sides of the toilet. Indeed, Stumpy and I were stunned that, with his enormous weight, the toilet had not collapsed beneath him. Monstrous Melvyn Musgrove was a grotesque character, and someone who Stumpy and I had always given a particularly wide berth to. An enormous slug-like boy with a great bulging bulk, cruel and pinhole shellfish eyes, greasy and blubbery lips, and glistening black hair that sat atop his pulsating overblown bubble of a head, whose method of punishment for anyone whom he took a dislike to was for his henchmen to hold them down on the ground with their arms and legs held out in a spread-eagled form, and then, looming above them, the sky and light now blocked from view, to drop on top of them, smothering them, their very breath being forced out of their body like a spent accordion, crushing the very life force out of them. How Stumpy and I loathed this loathsome character. As we looked around at the subservient faces around us, Musgrove asked, "Are we clear? Are there any questions?" It was Stumpy who immediately interjected. "Yeah, I got one, Musgrove. Where's Kerry O'Keefe and the normal court authorities?" "Ah, Sanderson, wondered if you'd appear. First of all, it's Judge Musgrove from now on, and I'm the new law in town. Let's just say Kerry O'Keefe received an offer he couldn't refuse." He gave a hideous yellow-toothed smile and, using both his fleshy hands to make some quotation signs, said, "He's been retired, and a word of warning, Sanderson, I'll be watching you and your lot very carefully from now on. Court dismissed." And with that, and a huge heaving effort, he rose from the throne, a couple of sycophants shouting, "Long live Judge Musgrove!" And the session was over. The next couple of weeks were a time of corrupt law and abject injustice. It very quickly became apparent that Musgrove was a hanging judge. Court sessions were held at every playtime as well as at lunchtime, and there were even extra sessions after school. Sentences were severe and unduly harsh, and in the space of just 2 weeks, at least 16 boys had been sentenced with terrible punishments that even made thrashings from the headmaster's cane look mild. Musgrove also swiftly passed new laws, banning this, banning that, and introducing high levels of taxation on sweets on anyone who purchased them from the tuck shop. There were now regular and long queues of kids, mainly from the year below, as well as a few from our year, who would queue up to pay Musgrove before any of the court sessions would start. For Stumpy and I, there was only one possible way out of this tyranny. So imagine our relief when 2 weeks later, Stephen Brookman returned from his 4-week student exchange in East Germany, which his father, as a lead journalist of the communist Morning Star, had arranged, and for which the school had given permission. Stephen Brookman, that freckle-faced left-wing warped mastermind, with swept-back Chairman Mao hair and round-rimmed Trotsky glasses, and who was a genius at devising nefarious schemes with which to bring down those whom he considered to be oppressors. And as we stood behind the bike sheds, Brookman now listened to mine and Stumpy's concerns and the Musgrove problem, and, like some communist Maigret, he pondered the dilemma, applying the logic of his twisted brain whilst smoking on his pipe containing strong and aromatic Soviet tobacco. Eventually he spoke. "This is outrageous! In such a short time, this school has now moved into dictatorship on the teaching side and dictatorship on the pupil side. I have also spoken with Kerry O'Keefe before our meeting and have found out the full heinous nature of this coup. There is only one thing for it. The system of justice has been broken, and so Monstrous Musgrove must too be broken and brought down. Leave this with me." Now, Brookman largely worked and operated in the shadows, and Stumpy and I both wondered just what he had planned. 2 days later, we were to find out, when he asked us to join him at the trial of Simple Pendleton up in the court area. As Monstrous Musgrove heaved his wobbly bulk into sight, flanked by his usual guard of 4 of the largest and strongest boys in our school, there was already a large crowd gathered. As Musgrove faced us, a small peewit pupil piped up, "This court is in session. All silent for Judge Musgrove." Like Nero, Musgrove proceeded to lower onto the Throne of Judgement. As any murmurings quietened, silence descended, and Musgrove began surveying the crowd with those crustacean eyes. From somewhere, someone suddenly shouted, "Down with the judge!" A couple of boys gasped. Musgrove turning his head towards the source of the shout. And then there was another. "Bring back Kerry O'Keefe!" Musgrove's greasy bubble of a face turned dark. "Who said that?" he shouted. "Order in court!" But now the clamour was growing, and even more people were chucking comments in, some of the insults being of such a nature as to be unmentionable here. Musgrove getting visibly more furious with each one. "Who shouted that? How dare you? You! I heard you!" This was extraordinary. And then, sailing overhead and from somewhere behind, Stumpy, Brookman and me saw the perfectly aimed arc of an egg in flight, which, when its flight path lowered, with a great splatter, cracked onto the glistening black hair of Musgrove, yolk and albumen running down his face. The crowd erupted into raucous laughter and cheering. Provoked into an explosion of rage, which had now reached bursting and boiling point, his head seeming to inflate like a huge repugnant bladder, Musgrove shrieked orders to his 4 henchmen to wade into the crowd to deal with the rebellion and re-establish order. These 4, though, were remarkably all still, standing stone still and to attention at the side of the throne, simply continuing to stare straight ahead. Then, with a great and painful-looking heave of effort, Musgrove made to stand with his leaden lump of a form, but for some inexplicable reason he failed to rise. He tried again, grunting loudly, but again the same. He seemed to be stuck to the toilet seat of the throne. Then again, and again, until finally, with a great groan and a huge sweating effort, he finally got to a position that resembled standing. But he was barely standing, for his knees were bending, and he was struggling to keep his balance as he wobbled and tremored, for we could all now see that his bulk was weighed down with the heavy porcelain of the Armitage Shanks toilet that was somehow attached and stuck to his trousers. As everyone roared even louder with laughter, Musgrove started to slowly hump painfully forward, his legs just about able to shuffle across the ground, moving like some hideous whelk with the toilet that was attached to his trousers, dragging and scraping across the floor. With sweat clearly visible on his greasy brow, Musgrove shouted at the baying crowd, "You treacherous dogs! You'll pay for this!" At this, Brookman raised his hand, and the 4 strong boys grabbed hold of Monstrous Musgrove, 2 on each arm, turned him around, and with the whole crowd following and still laughing wildly, carried him out onto the field and to the playground area. Reaching the playground, they stopped. In the fluttering breeze, Brookman gave another signal. The 4 boys raised Musgrove up to a great height, and then, with the swift downward motion of Brookman's hand, they dropped him with tremendous force onto the hard ground. With a great and ear-splitting crack, the porcelain toilet exploded into smithereens, and Musgrove fell backwards, hitting the floor with an enormous thud, and as he rolled and wobbled to stand, we all saw that even though the porcelain had been decimated, the wooden toilet seat was still stuck to the seat of his trousers. As he finally and laboriously managed to rise, everyone's laughter, jeering and shouting increased even more, and Musgrove could only slowly crawl off, blubbering expletives and curses, his face now the colour of a red octopus, the wooden toilet seat stuck to his trousers. Brookman then addressed the cheering crowd. "There has been a crack in the system of justice, but we will be arranging the installation of a new throne, and Judge O'Keefe will be returning in due course. The system of repression ends as of now." So, natural justice had prevailed. And later, Stumpy and I were to learn that this had all been achieved and made possible with the help and application to the Throne of Judgement of some specially formulated Soviet industrial glue, which Brookman had secured from the mail-order firm based in Vladivostok, from which he received his usual and regular seditious supplies, and with the use of payments, bribes and coercion to those 4 strong henchmen of Musgrove, and to selected and willing members of the court's audience. Brookman was fast becoming a master and virtuoso of such subversive practices, which would reach their destabilising zenith when we moved up to upper school later that year. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bon nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy.